This is the American big brother to the Charger. And while the little brother might get all the racing cred and all of the movie cred, this one was bigger, meaner, and more muscular. It's the Dodge Challenger. Towards the end of 1969, Chrysler saw the popularity of the Mercury Cougar, the Mach 1, and the Firebird, these really big displacement, large muscle cars. And they realized that they didn't have a car to match that. So very late in the game, they decided to act. They took their E-body platform and made a more luxurious, high-end muscle car. And I do mean luxurious. It had optional air conditioning and optional rear window defogging. This was high praise. But most importantly, since this is Dodge, the engine got a massive bump. There was a huge engine lineup ranging from 125 horsepower, 3.2 liter inline sixes for Carroll, I guess, all the way up to the 440 cubic inch 6-barrel carb 390 horsepower V8s in the legendary RT lineup. Obviously, anyone who's ever seen this channel or anything about American muscle cars and thinks that 440 cubic inches of V8 muscle makes less than 400 horsepower, well, that was a lie. For both insurance and regulations and all these other things. We've discussed it before. And to further discredit the 440 horsepower, the smaller 7-liter, 427 cubic inch Hemi V8 made 425 horsepower, nearly 500 torque. So it's bigger with fewer carburetors, and yet it makes more horsepower and 100 more torque. Seems legit. Now, whether it made 425 horsepower or 470 horsepower, this massive 1970s muscle car did the standing quarter mile in 13 seconds, which is fast today. It's insane how a car from 50 years ago, almost exactly, can humiliate quite a few modern sports cars in the standing quarter mile, despite weighing more than an apartment building. Now, mentioning that weight, they actually tried to turn the Challenger into a cornering machine for some reason with the TA, or Trans Am trim. The TA got a smaller 340 cubic inch V8, both for better weight distribution and for regulations. It got a Hurst 4-speed gearbox, front disc brakes, and different sized tires front and rear. It was one of the first American cars to ever do that. Normally they were nice and square all four corners. However, the front tires were a bit too small, and Dan Gurney's All-American Racing team quickly discovered that understeer was rather chronic and it never achieved any real racing success. They should have left it to the Charger. That could keep up with Steve McQueen in a Mustang GT. They should know this by now. Now, I should also mention that after 1970, the Challenger's pace dropped off dramatically. As one person put it when discussing the value of these vehicles, 1970 was a great year, then it had a good year, and then 3 terrible years because of the gas crisis and new emission regulations, and by 1974, the Challenger was retired from production altogether. But not for long, because in 1977, the Challenger name was back and it was dragged through the mud even more. Dodge took a rebadged Mitsubishi Galant Lambda and called it the Challenger. Sure, it was rear-wheel drive and a coupe, but it was a 4-cylinder box making 105 horsepower. Gotta love 1970s American auto industries. It's great, with absolutely no problems. It definitely didn't kill the Challenger name for decades. Exactly 3 decades to be precise, because rumors began circulating in 2005 about a new Challenger, and it wasn't no rebadged Galant. And when it came out in 2008, the styling was brilliantly retro, with a 3.5-liter V6. Oh, and a 5.7-liter Hemi V8. because this is a Challenger from Dodge. Bigger is always better. That is the Dodge model. Look at the Viper. But the real crown jewel came from the lunatics at SRT, who made a V8 with 6.1 liters, no supercharger, no turbocharger, brought up to 425 horsepower for realsies this time, with a 6-speed manual and an LSD. Now, I should emphasize, these third-gen Challengers, which we are still on, by the way, the Challenger has been in the third gen since 2008. These are still boats. The lightest one is 3,800 pounds. But actually that's kind of their charm. In a world that shifts focus from, straight line speed and pure power into lap times and G-forces and who can get the best magnetic suspension layout, the big boat's massive horsepower figures of the Challenger, and the Charger for that matter too, are welcome sights. They're the last proper muscle cars. It's the only two-door muscle car on the entire market. And with a refresh in 2015, that title was solidified with the creation of the Hellcat. SRT took the 6.2-liter Hemi, threw on a massive supercharger, and tuned it up to 707 horsepower. This was rear-wheel drive with 4,400 pounds, and yet it could do the quarter mile in 11.6 seconds and reach a top speed just south of 200 miles an hour. And it looks like a brick. It's the F4 Phantom of cars. It has no capabilities in the handling department or the aerodynamic department, but they shoved the biggest engine they possibly could, and it went like a bat out of hell. And for $61,000, the performance in the straight line anyway is simply unbeatable. So Dodge went and beat it. Enter the Demon. The old supercharger was replaced with a, quite frankly, ludicrous 2.7-liter capacity version, which when bolted on to the 6.2-liter Hemi, makes 840 horsepower and 770 torque on a 100-octane fuel. That is a horsepower per ton ratio of 440 horsepower per ton. It's better than a Ferrari 458 Speciale, and only slightly worse than the original Veyron. And it's like $90,000 when new. Now they go for six figures because of the value, but think about that. This thing was destined to set records from the beginning. It has the second fastest non-electric 0 to 60 ever recorded at 2.3 seconds. It is the fastest rear-wheel drive car in the world 0 to 60, because all the electric cars are four-wheel drive. And even the Porsche 918, which is the only one faster, is all-wheel drive, and that beat it by just 0.2 of a second. It also set much cooler records, which I know is weird when you have a world record-setting 0 to 60 time, but it has records like the fastest production quarter mile at 9.65 seconds, the hardest launching road car with 1.8 G of forward acceleration, or what about the largest hood scoop ever fitted to a production car, or what about the first production car to ever do a wheelie? I didn't even know that was a record that you could have, but there we go. Now, how did they do this? Because the Challenger is a 4,400-pound boat, and they just made it out-accelerate every single hypercar ever made, short of the 918. Well, they made the rear brakes smaller, the roll bars hollow, and every single seat bar in the driver's optional. When, yes, you could buy them back for a single dollar. You know that this is a drag racing car when the rear brakes on the most powerful model are smaller. That's just suicidal. But anyway, that wasn't the only thing you could buy for a dollar. You could also buy the Demon Crate. The Demon Crate includes a new air filter, high-octane fuel equipment so you can actually run the 100-octane fuel without blowing your engine to pieces, and proper skinny front tires because you're not turning on a straightaway, so you don't need a lot of contact because there's no traction there. You don't need, it's not all-wheel drive, it's not going to be turning, so why not just make them bicycle tires? It's a brilliantly simple thing. Legally, you can't put them on the road because then you would just die, but opting them in for $1 seems like a pretty good deal. Only 3,300 of them were ever made, and as I mentioned earlier, they are some of the most valuable and desirable Challengers ever made, even rivaling the values of some well-maintained 1970 Challengers. So where do you go from there? After all the Hellcats and Demons, Dodge decided to expand the Challenger range. All-wheel drive was introduced as an option on certain models, and as the years went by, the Hellcat got even more powerful, up to 717 horsepower in case you were missing some in your 700 horsepower muscle car. And SRT thought that they were missing some, so they added the red eye, and then the wide body, and then the super stock packages, all of which make at least 797 horsepower, and the super stock is the creme de la crop of the current Challenger range. It makes 807 horsepower because the road-going 93 octane Demon makes 808, so you can't beat that. And it does feature a lot of features from the Demon. It's aluminum wheels, it's drag suspension, it's shorter final drive ratio. However, unlike the Demon, it has proper size brakes, which is always nice. It also has a shaker hood instead of a massive gaw of a hood scoop, and it has some carbon fiber trim on the inside. And for $84,000, it's another bargain in the straight line speed department. And yes, Mr. Toretto, it is a 10-second car.